You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Halcyon. Ransomware is still one of the largest threats facing businesses in 2023. The Halcyon platform was built to stop it through a multi-layered protection approach featuring full encryption key capture, automated decryption, and the ability to prevent other security tools on the endpoint from being unhooked. Learn more about how they're leveraging Capsule network-based machine learning to reduce ransomware recovery times down to minutes by visiting halcyon.ai. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down the threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems, and protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
So through our collaboration with NK News, we got the opportunity to take a look at the emails, analyze the malicious activities, and basically scope the overall campaign that was going on at the time.
That's Aleksandar Milenkoski, Senior Threat Researcher at Sentinel Labs. The research we're discussing today is titled Kimsuky Strikes Again. New social engineering campaign aims to steal credentials and gather strategic intelligence.
Collaborate with NK News and NK Pro. So just a little bit context for the listeners. NK News and NK Pro is a prominent news and analysis outlet on North Korean affairs, which collaborates with experts in North Korean affairs and publishes detailed reports on North Korea to its subscription base. So the campaign that we talked about in our research is basically a social engineering campaign done via email correspondence that was targeting experts in North Korean affairs and members of NK Pro. That is a subscription service of NK News. So through our collaboration with NK News, we got the opportunity to take a look at the emails, analyze the malicious activities, and basically scope the overall campaign that was going on at the time.
Well, before we dig into the specific campaign here, can you share with us what do we know about Kimsuky?
Sure. So Kimsuky is a North Korean Nexus threat actor that's been active since at least 2012. The group in general is known for a lot of badness, like primarily conducting targeted social engineering and spear phishing campaigns by impersonating relevant individuals. In general, the group's goal is to collect strategic intelligence, for example, on geopolitical affairs, foreign policy developments, and so on, primarily done through credential theft and delivery of malware. One prominent characteristic of the group is that it's consistently active and it's very persistent as well. And it dedicates a lot of time and effort in conducting its campaigns.
How would you rate their sophistication?
Kimsuky is very active and very persistent. So it's very thorough in conducting its social engineering campaigns, right? This means also planning who is sending the mail, the tone of the emails, and what one of their characteristics is really first establishing trust and rapport with the victims. And the initial communication usually does not contain any malicious artifacts. At least that was the case in the campaign that we discussed in our latest research. However, they use every available opportunity during the correspondence to deliver either weaponized documents or malicious links and whatnot. So from that perspective, from the social engineering perspective, I would say that they are very, very persistent and very active in that, very dedicated on that front.
Well, let's walk through this particular campaign. How does it begin? What's the initial contact like?
Right. So what we observed in general is primarily a social engineering campaign done via email correspondence. Again, that was targeting experts in North Korean affairs and members of NK Pro, the subscription service of NK News. So the overall campaign was done via email. The social engineering attacks involved mainly two types of activities. So they were contacting experts on North Korean affairs, sending draft Google documents for the experts to review. And the other vector was they were sending requests for resetting accounts to NK Pro membership, basically leading or luring members to malicious websites that capture entered credentials. When it's focusing on the correspondence with the targeted experts in North Korean affairs, as I mentioned before, the hallmark of this activity is that the attackers focused on first establishing trust or rapport with the victims, and the initial communication did not contain any malicious artifact.
The email that you all share in your research here is quite interesting. They're reaching out to people and asking for them to share their expertise on the NK nuclear threat. So really, I guess, touching a bit of the victim's ego to start with.
Well, the individuals that were targeted were experts in those affairs, right? So maybe some further context for the listeners. NK Pro, that is the subscription service of NK News, collaborates with such experts in North Korean affairs and publishes detailed reports on North Korea to its subscription base. As I mentioned before, Kimsuky is very dedicated to social engineering campaigns. So the way that they targeted the individuals was consistent with the usual things or activities that the targeted individuals are usually involved in.
So they're using some custom domains here to make it appear as though their correspondence is coming from NK Pro?
Sure. So they basically used email domains that were mimicking legitimate domains. And also when it comes to capturing credentials or stealing credentials, they also used websites that they constructed and they mimic legitimate domains, specifically of the NK Pro subscription service.
So you mentioned that they're very deliberate about establishing rapport with their victims here, and that there could be several emails that go back and forth before they actually send a malicious file. Can you walk us through that? I mean, at what point do they actually drop that malicious file?
So that depends on how the conversation goes, right? So as I mentioned, they first try to establish report. For example, to the expert, they send draft Google documents for them to review. If they notice that the target engages in the conversation, right, after some time, they attempt to deliver a payload. What's one interesting thing to note about Kimsuky is that if they notice that the email correspondence slowed down or has died out, they tend to send also reminders. So that aligns with the persistency that I mentioned a few moments ago.
Yeah. What is the payload that they ultimately send?
So from a technical perspective, they had two goals, right? The first goal is theft of Google email and NK Pro subscription credentials through impersonation of legitimate login sites. So these malicious sites, in the context of the emails, they were in the form of links on which the victim should click. These malicious sites were constructed to capture entered credentials, basically, and transport them back to the threat actors. The second goal from a technical perspective was delivery of known Kimsuky reconnaissance malware. Now, the thing about this reconnaissance malware is that it enables further precision attacks, whether that would be through custom tailload malware or some exploits that the threat group has its own possession and whatnot down the line.
So what are your recommendations then for organizations to best protect themselves here?
Right. So all the measures for protecting against social engineering attacks, I would say they apply here as well. One thing is verifying the legitimacy of emails, of course. This involves usually examining the sender's email origin by investigating email headers, but even going beyond that, like evaluating the language used, the overall style and tone of the email correspondence. For example, if the sender is insisting on downloading a document or clicking on a given link, this should be enough to raise suspicion. Note that Kimsuky is known for reminding victims, as I mentioned earlier, to do this if they see that the correspondence has slowed down. Going further, proper email or account security, of course. So MFA or multiple factor authentication is definitely a must. We at Sentinel Labs recommend adopting what we call attack resilient MFA techniques, right? Such as the use of hardware tokens in favor of some less secure MFA, such as SMS messages or push notifications. Threat actors these days are known to evade SMS messages or push-based notification MFA authentication. And finally, for the specifically targeted individuals, it is also important to report suspicious activities to the authorities. The NSA report, which was discussing this activity on a broader scale, provides instructions how to do this regarding Kimsuky activity specifically.
It seems to me like this really is a reminder of how your email account, which in this case, flows through these folks' Google accounts. It really is the key to everything. So much goes through there. If someone gains access to your email account, there's just so much they can do.
Exactly. So we covered before the technical goals of the campaign, right? But the technical goals always translate to rather strategic or non-technical goals, right? So in a way, by gaining access to the email inboxes of the targeted experts in North Korea, the attackers can access their email correspondence, which provides intelligence to Kimsuky on its own, I would say. For example, Kimsuky is known to deploy kind of auto-forwarders of incoming emails to their own email addresses. So in a way that gives them real-time insight into email correspondence. But also important not to forget is that access to victims' email inboxes also enable Kimsuky to possibly impersonate the affected victims in further attacks. So this thing can propagate as well. We also mentioned that they targeted credentials to the subscription content of NK Pro. So by gaining access to the subscription content of NK Pro, Kimsuky in a way has a direct insight into how the Western world perceives the ongoing developments in North Korea. So all of this, in a way, I would say, builds up the North Korean strategic intelligence, which ultimately guides North Korean authorities in the process of fine-tuning or further developing, if you wish, their overall strategy on a long-term basis. Well, mid-term, short-term basis as well.
Our thanks to Aleksandar Milenkoski from SentinelOne for joining us. The research is titled Kimsuky Strikes Again. New social engineering campaign aims to steal credentials and gather strategic intelligence. We'll have a link in the show notes. There's nothing worse than relying on a legacy SIM that your security team has outgrown, especially when it impacts your ability to detect real incidents. Hunter's SOC platform offers built-in, always up-to-date detection rules and automatic correlation that allows SOC analysts to focus on higher-value tasks that impact your organization. It's time to move to a platform that reduces risk, complexity, and cost for the SOC. It's time to replace your SIM. Learn more by visiting hunters.security today. The CyberWire Research Saturday podcast is a production of N2K Networks, proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Elliot Peltzman, our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.